Serving as the first officer of a starship puts a person in the unenviable position of representing the crew to the captain while also representing the captain to the crew. And it's not always shown in Star Trek, but there seems to be a lot of administration to the job as well. There are crew rotations to plan, service reviews, and ship readiness reports to draft. Yet, with all that said, there also seems to be a lot of sitting down beside the captain, or, in Riker's case, cocking your leg up. Either way, it's pretty hard to do paperwork when there isn't even a desk to lean on. I'm Marcus Bronzy, and today we're going to break down the rankings of all of the first officers across the Star Trek franchise. It's likely that the enjoyment of each iteration will come from the enjoyment of that specific show as a whole, but I think there's going to be a few surprises in this list. In fact, I'm pretty sure, because I put them in. Feel free to sound off in the comment section with your opinions. For now, let's see who the real number one is. Number 10, an honourable mention. First, an honourable mention goes to number 1, the pitbull scene in the Picard series. His name is De Niro, and he's a cute little number 1. You cute little boy, you want a treat? Anyway, it was Patrick Stewart's idea to have the pit in the show because he thinks a man and a dog would say a lot about his character, and he also feels the breed of pit bulls are currently misrepresented and wants to show them in a much more friendly light. Number 9, Michael Burnham, Star Trek Discovery. Whilst she's a compelling character once she arrives on the Discovery, Michael Burnham did get her captain killed and eaten by Klingons. Burnham is a good example of how strong characters do not always make strong leaders, but she's also a good example of how a character can grow over time. In the other entries for this franchise, most of the characters arrive in the roles that they're assigned to throughout the series run. Riker was first officer from pilot, and Chakotay assumes his role, going through, well, a necessity. But Burnham's journey is told in reverse. She begins the show as a first officer, but makes such a calamitous error that, well, she does pretty much start a war, doesn't she? That she's given a court-martial, stripped of her rank, and put in jail. By the end of the second season, she may have all the characteristics needed to assume that role again, but for the moment, she comes bottom of my list. Number 8, RAFFI MUSIKER. This is a ranking that could easily change with time. Based on what's been shown in the show so far, MUSIKER is a broken woman who's doing her best just to get by from day to day. She has lost her family and her career, got a bit of a dodgy relationship with the Source, and is now regulated to running around with Picard on his latest scheme. But as Picard's first officer on the USS Verity, she was a master of numbers and patterns, allowing her to build resettlement models that aided the rescue of many thousands of Romulans. She worked with a dedication that ended up consuming her completely, so when this was taken away from her, she had nothing left. But if given a reason again, RAFFI could well rise to one of the higher numbers on this list. Number 7, CHAKOTAY, Star Trek Voyager. CHAKOTAY, despite 7 seasons on Voyager, had never got the room or the stories to bring him into the higher rankings of the first officers on this list. The first season was an open field for him to explore the conflict going on from a marquee leader to a Starfleet subordinate. And although this would be touched in on once in a while on Voyager's run, it never really came to anything. Robert Beltran has not been shy about voicing his opinion on writing on the show and how it negatively impacted Chakotay as a character. While other characters got the chance to shine, Chakotay was one of the characters who faded into the background. This led to an awkward situation. Even when he did receive an episode up front, it was with a character the audience didn't necessarily care about in the same way they cared about Janeway, 7 of 9, or the Doctor. Chakotay was a victim of writing more than anything else, which is why he's pretty low on this list. A great could have been, but unfortunately, a missed opportunity in the long run. Number 6, T'Pol, Star Trek Enterprise. Enterprise didn't have the easiest journey, either on or off the screen. From its beginnings, it suffered from the same issues that many prequels do. The audience knows where it's eventually going to go. So after the novelty wears off, where do you go? It's well known that Vulcans and humans are founding members of the Federation. Therefore, the first deep space vessel would naturally have a Vulcan crew member. In the early episodes, T'Pol is just as acerbic as any rigid Vulcan could be. But then something quite wonderful happened. The writers, perhaps learning from the issues with Chakotay and Voyager, started giving her the room to grow and actually gave her a character arc. She goes from advising the mission to becoming one of Archer's fiercest supporters. She endures assault, illness, loneliness, and the threat of exile, yet she grows closer to the crew every time. She's a capable commander when Archer's off ship, and by the time she straightens the collar on his dress uniform before he walks up to the podium in that final episode, everyone could feel the emotion in the hug that passes between them, and it's something that only a first officer would get if they did their job for their captain. Now, T'Pol, like the rest of the characters on the Enterprise, has been somewhat lost to apathy, but this is a distinct injustice. She's an excellent character, one that deserves a revival, if the producers are listening, alright? Well, she could do, she's Vulcan, they live for ages. Number 5, Number 1, Una, Star Trek Discovery. With the small amount of screen time she's had so far, Number 1 has made quite the impact on Star Trek Discovery. She's already been shown to be a great friend of Captain Pike, but thanks to the Short Trek Q&A, make sure you watch her Short Treks, okay? They're awesome. She has also been shown to be a great mentor to Spock as well. In this modern fast-paced Star Trek, character building can sometimes be lost to spectacle. Discovery has dazzled with its big budget CGI and occasionally has rang a little bit hollow because of it. Not so with Una. Stepping into the shoes of Major Barrett, albeit half a century later, carries weight in the Star Trek family, and her Number 1 is a very different creature. But she is a strong and competent creation, easily taking control of each situation she's thrust into. To see her develop even further on a spin-off show with Pike, well, that would be fantastic. But if the last we saw of Number 1 was her smile as the Enterprise warped away into new adventures, well, then we'd have seen a brilliant first officer to a brilliant first captain. Number 4, Major Kira, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine was a different beast in the Star Trek franchise. Debuting while the Next Generation was still on the air, it would naturally be subject to comparisons from the beginning. So the new first officer was going to be measured against Riker straight away, and they couldn't be more different. Major Kira is introduced as a hot-headed, strongly anti-Federation character in the pilot. She is brash, unwilling to bow to Federation rules, and it looks like she's going to be a massive thorn in Sisko's side. But that relationship changes entirely when Sisko goes from just being her commanding officer to the emissary to the very gods she worships. This is a unique relationship in Star Trek. Whilst many first officers show their captain's hero worship, Kira actually worships what Sisko represents, and there are times when this tries their relationship. But it also makes them closer in a way that many first officers and captains in this list are just not. She, for example, is one of the first few crew members who truly understands what the prophets mean to Sisko. She supports the decisions he makes when it comes to her religion. This goes beyond duty and beyond loyalty. Were the question ever asked, she would support Sisko to the grave. She's also one of the few to understand that Sisko had a happy ending at the end of DS9, completing his task as an emissary and leaving DS9 to stay with the prophets. Well, for a little while at least. She takes control of DS9, content in the knowledge that in the grief around her, there's also joy. Number 3, Saru, Star Trek Discovery. Saru is the first officer who's been through hell and back and come out the other side as a transformed creature. Well, quite literally, a transformed creature. Originally serving on the Shenzhou, he is assigned to Discovery once the ship is lost in the opening volley of the Klingon War. He's openly hostile to Burnham when she arrives on board, unwilling to let her forget the part she played in killing the previous captain. But despite the natural cowardice of his race, Saru blossoms under, ironically, Captain Lorca, and then later Captain Pike. He is steady. He is both a disciplinarian and a carer. He's able to weather enormous challenges and rise to the situation when command is called for. He successfully leads the crew home from the Mirror Universe, and despite his own struggles through the second season, he's a strong and capable first officer to Pike. He again assumes command in the battle with Control, leading the crew to the future through the wormhole created by Burnham's suit. Saru is a character that in a relatively short amount of time has risen to a deserved spot as one of the greatest officers in the fleet. With season 3 of Discovery on the way, it remains to be seen whether he will remain as first officer or rise to the rank of captain. But what is certain is he is a Kelpian, well capable of both. Number 2, Riker, Star Trek The Next Generation. No one in Star Trek cocked a leg like Riker, swung their leg over a chair like Riker, got up backwards off a chair like Riker, leant on things like... I could go on. Fresh-faced Will Riker was a little stiff, but as soon as he grew that beard, he became the definition of number one. From the second season of TNG, he relaxed in a way he hadn't before. He started to bond with Picard while still keeping their formal distance, and over the course of the series' run, he grew comfortable on the Enterprise and his new family aboard. He met with criticism for his refusal to leave the post, despite being offered his own command several times. One such refusal saved his life after the Melbourne was destroyed at Wolf 359. Riker was the point man for Picard. He was charming and serious when necessary, guiding the crew whilst also defending them as needed. The relationship with Picard was so close that when the command of the Enterprise passed to Edward Jellicoe, Riker experienced true shock. Gone was the cordial greetings and the genial ways speaking. Here was a captain who didn't give a damn about working with the crew, and as such, Riker as first officer slipped slightly down the list because he was fantastic for Picard, but a pretty woeful one to Captain Jellicoe. But if this list were based on personalities, smiles and beards alone, Riker with your little cocked up leg, you'd have a landslide win. Number 1, Spock, the original series. I mean, come on. Who else did you expect? Spock defined what it meant to be a first officer. Cool and logical, with an ability for cunning and a penchant for command. Spock is one of the longest serving first officers in the franchise, beginning his tenure as first officer in 1966 and remaining so, albeit with the rank of captain until 1990. Spock was the very model of the dedicated right-hand man. He is both the cause of some of Kirk's greatest woes and the saviour of his captain on so many occasions. He's well respected and, with the exception of Dr. McCoy, very rarely needs to be challenged. His desire to aid and carry out the primary mission of Starfleet was legendary. As first officer, he sought to keep his captain safe, even if that meant risking his own career to do it. He's at the top of this list not just because his tenure is the longest, but also because for generations of fans, Spock simply was Star Trek. Live long and prosper, Spock, the greatest number 1 of them all. Who would be in your list? Let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to Trek Culture here on YouTube and on Twitter as well. I'm Marcus Bronzy. You can find me at MarcusBronzy on all social medias. I'll see you next time.